Part 2 of Preludes. It seems to follow from Part 1. Naturally, it's the next morning after the winter evening. But that's not necessarily the case. Remember, each of these can be read as their own fragment, as their own piece, as their own prelude to something greater. And this time around, of course, we have moved to morning. Okay, the morning comes to consciousness. Obviously, waking up is the image that's happening there. And instead of saying waking up, we get comes to consciousness. It's almost that forced waking up that we have. It's a reasonably unpleasant sort of feeling or sense that you suddenly come to a realization. There's the foreshadowing of something that is going to be revealed if something comes to consciousness. He doesn't say in the morning I woke up, which of course would be terrible writing, but also would not suggest any emotive response. Of faint stale smells of beer. So we do have a remnant of the night before. Okay, faint stale smells of beer. Whether or not the beer was drunk for celebration or just drunk for numbing is not made clear, but one would assume that the second is more correct. There doesn't seem to be any other remnants of celebration around, just the faint smells of beer, which is possibly not a great thing. From the sawdust trampled street, there's a sawdust again, which we see in proof rock a lot. But of course, remember, this also gives us time and place. It's a contextual thing, because sawdust, of course, is used in the streets when there are it's before cars, there's horse manure, there's wetness, there's guttering is not around. It's again not exactly the most pleasant part of town. The streets aren't cobbled, the streets aren't paved. They're sawdust trampled with all its muddy feet that pressed early coffee stands. And here we have muddy feet. Okay, yet again we have that interesting image. Or, you could even have this one, metonym or synecdoche. The part telling the whole, or the whole telling the part. Muddy feet are, of course, the hordes and crowds of people. The plural feet reminds us that, if there's more than one, then there is an innumerable or immeasurable amount of people. It's obviously more than two. The word press, as opposed to move, suggests a crowd, suggests some kind of movement forward. But they're pressing toward early coffee stands. Okay. A thing to get us ready for a work day. So, much like the one before, which was the end of the work day, the winter evening settles down, this is the coming of the work day. It's kind of like we've turned time backwards here. You can almost read this one before the other one in many ways, but it's done afterward. Pressed early coffee stand with other masquerades that time resumes, and then we have that mask image again that's in proof rock. Other masquerades, so other falsities, the false world outside, the false world of the internal, the false soul, the false self, all those parts participating here. That time resumes. One thinks of all the hands that are raising dingy shades in 1,000 furnished rooms. And there we have that collective experience and urbanity. The urban world, thousands of people, all doing the same thing at the same time, the same mundane practice, living in the same spaces. There is no distinction, there is no individuality, therefore there is no way to encapsulate the development of the individual self. That's the crisis of the modernist. One of the cog, one of the many, one of the machine. And that's really the second Prelude's crisis and central purpose.